I have served on the Galactic Council for over 300 cycles, and never in my extensive career have I witnessed such an unprecedented display of pure chaos as I did during emergency session 947. Looking back now, I can almost laugh at how wrong we were. Almost. Order. I demand order in these chambers. First Speaker Thalnayar's voice boomed through the vast crystalline dome of the council chambers. Her normally composed demeanor had cracked, revealing the stress that had been building over the past several rotations. As Admiral of the Centaurian Fleet and senior member of the Security Council, I, Kaz Loth, had the unfortunate privilege of delivering the report that sparked this pandemonium. The data crystals projected above the central podium told a story that many refused to accept. Humanity's expansion rate had quadrupled in the past cycle alone. This is outrageous. High Counselor Rix AR slammed his appendages against the hovering platform of his delegation pod. When we welcomed these humans into the galactic community, they agreed to follow our expansion protocols. Now they have colonies in 37 systems. I cleared my throat, a habit I admittedly picked up from our human guests. High Counselor, if you would allow me to continue. Continue. What more evidence do we need? Rix AR's scales had turned a deep shade of purple, a clear sign of agitation among his species. These humans are like a virus, spreading unchecked through our carefully balanced sectors. First Speaker Thalnar's bioluminescent patterns pulsed in warning sequences. High Counselor Rix AR, you will maintain decorum in these chambers. I manipulated the holographic controls, bringing up a new set of projections. The expansion itself isn't our primary concern. It's the method they're using. Humans aren't just settling empty systems, they're developing them at an unprecedented rate, turning gas giants into fuel stations, mining asteroid belts we deemed unprofitable, establishing trade routes through regions we considered navigational hazards. Exactly my point, Rix AR interjected. They show no respect for established protocols. Or perhaps came a calm voice from the lower tiers. They show us the flaws in our protocols. The chamber fell silent as Ambassador Yax-Ul of the Prometheus sector rose from her seat. Being from the region with the highest concentration of human settlements, her opinion carried significant weight. In my sector, human innovations have increased trade efficiency by 200%. Their solutions, while unorthodox, work. I nodded in agreement. But before I could speak, the chamber erupted again. Various counselors shouted over each other, their universal translators creating a cacophony of overlapping arguments. Some demanded immediate sanctions, others called for military intervention, and a few brave souls suggested we should learn from the humans instead. Enough. First Speaker Thalnar's voice cut through the chaos. The bioluminescent patterns across her skin now pulsed an angry red. Admiral Kaz Loth, your recommendation. I took a moment to gather my thoughts, knowing my next words would shape the course of galactic politics. High Council, while I share your concerns about unchecked expansion, I must point out that conventional containment methods won't work with humans. They're different. Different, Rix AR scoffed. They're primitive, barely a Type 1 civilization when we found them. And in just 50 cycles, they've achieved what took most of us millennia, I countered. Their adaptability, their drive to overcome challenges, it's unlike anything we've seen before. Traditional sanctions won't stop them. They'll find a way around them, probably discovering 3 new scientific principles in the process. The chamber fell into an uneasy silence as my words sank in. Little did we know then that this very trait, this human unpredictability that so terrified the council, would soon become our greatest hope for survival. I remember the day we first encountered humans. Our long-range scouts had detected unusual energy signatures from a seemingly unremarkable yellow star system. What we found there still makes me chuckle. A species using primitive rocket technology to maintain a small orbital station while simultaneously developing quantum computing. It was like watching someone try to build a house starting with the roof. They're doing what First Speaker Thalnar had asked during that initial briefing, her translator struggling to convey her bewilderment. They're launching vehicles powered by controlled explosions, I reported, while also experimenting with quantum entanglement communication. That was humanity in a nutshell, simultaneously primitive and advanced, reckless and brilliant. The Council's first attempt at controlling them came in the form of technological guidelines. We provided them with standardized FTL drive specifications, expecting them to spend decades studying and slowly implementing them like every other species had done. 3 months later, Captain Abigail Winters showed up at our primary starbase in a ship that shouldn't have existed. Not only had humans modified our FTL design, but they'd also somehow made it 30% more efficient while running on something called espresso. I still remember the security feed of her arrival, casually sipping from a metal container while our top engineers tried to understand how she'd managed to integrate a beverage dispensing system into the ship's power grid. "Your fuel synthesis protocols seemed a bit rigid," she'd said with a shrug. "So we made some adjustments." That was just the beginning. Over the next few cycles, humans broke practically every technological development guideline we'd established. When we restricted their access to antimatter production facilities, they developed something called fusion. When we tried to limit their AI development, they created biological computers using something called neural networks. The Council's next brilliant idea was to restrict their expansion through bureaucracy. We introduced a 47-step colonization application process that took most species several years to complete. Humans responded by creating an AI-sorry neural network that could fill out all the forms in minutes. They named it BOB, Bureaucracy Optimization Butler, and somehow gave it a sense of humor. BOB started adding jokes to the application footnotes, and I swear some of our processing clerks were approving permits just to read the next one. But everything changed during Standard Cycle 947, when our deep space monitoring stations detected something approaching from the Galactic Core. At first, we thought it was a sensor malfunction. The reading suggested a mass of nothing. A void that consumed everything in its path, including light itself. "Show me the projection models again," I demanded, staring at the holographic display in the emergency command center. The visualization showed the entity's path through the galaxy, systems simply vanishing in its wake. General Yax-Ol, our chief of military operations, manipulated the controls with his neural interface. Based on current trajectories, it will reach populated systems within 3 cycles. Our weapons are useless against it. You cannot shoot nothing. Surely our barrier technology High Counselor Rix AR began, but his voice trailed off as the simulation showed barrier after barrier failing. "We've already lost contact with Research Station Gamma 9, reported Dr. Maya Patel, one of our few human scientific advisors. She stood out in the chamber, her casual stance contrasting with our rigid postures. But before they went dark, they transmitted some interesting data about the void structure. Interesting, how I asked, noting the gleam in her eyes that I'd learned to associate with humans about to suggest something either brilliant or terrifying. Usually both. "Well," she said, pulling up a complex diagram on her personal holographic display, "it's not actually nothing. It's more like everything canceling itself out. A perfect entropy state. And where there's a state, there's a way to disrupt it," finished Ambassador Sophia Blake, who had been quietly observing until now. She stepped forward, her movement drawing all eyes in the chamber. "You know, we humans have some experience with breaking things that supposedly can't be broken." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. We had spent cycles trying to contain humanity's chaotic nature, their tendency to ignore established principles and find unconventional solutions. Now, faced with an enemy that operated on absolute cosmic principles, perhaps chaos was exactly what we needed. I looked around the chamber at my fellow council members, seeing the same realization dawn on their faces. High Counselor Rix AR's scales had turned an interesting shade of green, the color of resignation among his people. First Speaker Thal Nayar's bioluminescent patterns were pulsing in a pattern I'd never seen before, probably because we'd never been desperate enough to consider what I was about to propose. "Dr. Patel," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "how quickly can you assemble a human scientific task force?" She grinned, that particular human expression that usually meant someone was about to have a very bad day. "Admiral, they're already working on it. We started brainstorming solutions the moment we detected the anomaly. Against council protocols, of course. But of course they had. And for the first time in my long career, I was grateful for humanity's complete disregard for proper procedures. The Grand Council chamber had never felt smaller than when Ambassador Sophia Blake strode in with her team. The human delegation moved with an air of casual confidence that made several council members visibly uncomfortable. Behind her walked Captain Marcus Sterling, a man whose unofficial military record contained more successful improvisations than actual planned operations, and Dr. Elizabeth Blackwood, whose approach to physics could best be described as personally offensive to the laws of nature. "Thank you for agreeing to this emergency session," Sophia began, not bothering with the traditional 47 forms of greeting. Several counselors gasped at the breach of protocol, but she continued undeterred. "We've analyzed the data from the lost research stations, and we need to move fast." "Move fast," High Counselor Rick's AR's scales flickered in agitation. "This is the Grand Council. We don't move fast. We deliberate. We consider we die," Captain Sterling interrupted, stepping forward. "Sorry, but while we're following protocols, that void is consuming entire systems. Research Station Delta 12 just went dark, by the way. That's 3 hours ahead of our projected timeline." I watched First Speaker Thal Nayar's bioluminescent patterns shift from diplomatic azure to worried violet. "You mentioned analyzing the data. What have you found?" Dr. Blackwood activated her holographic display, filling the chamber with swirling patterns of mathematical equations. "We're not dealing with natural entropy, as initially thought. These are entities, we're calling them void eaters. They're intelligent, and they're hungry." "That's impossible," Professor Yul Mar, our leading theoretical physicist, rose from his hover seat. "No life form can exist in a state of perfect entropy." "Yeah, that's what the laws of physics said too," Dr. Blackwood replied with a grin. "The Void Eaters apparently didn't get that memo. But here's the interesting part: we found references to them in ancient data archives. They've been here before." The chamber erupted in murmurs as she brought up historical records. Ancient civilizations, long vanished from our galaxy, had faced these entities. Each time, the pattern was the same: methodical attempts to fight the impossible enemy, carefully planned defensive strategies, and total annihilation. "The Xerxian Empire tried using quantum barrier networks," Dr. Blackwood continued. "The Void Eaters adapted. The Meyer-Kath Collective attempted temporal displacement. The Void Eaters consumed time itself in those sectors. Every civilization that faced them followed their established protocols, used their most advanced technology, and failed." "Then we are doomed," Rick's AR declared, his scales now a deep shade of defeat purple. "Not necessarily," Captain Sterling said, stepping forward. "See, all those civilizations had something in common. They were logical, methodical, predictable. The Void Eaters adapted to their patterns easily. But humans were anything but predictable." Ambassador Blake nodded. "We have a plan. Well, several plans, most of them probably terrible, but one of them might just work." Might First Speaker Thal Nayar's patterns pulsed with concern. "That's the point," I found myself saying, finally understanding where they were going with this. The Void Eaters adapt to patterns, to predictability. But humans, we're really good at breaking patterns," Dr. Blackwood finished. "Our proposal is simple: we take command of the combined fleet." The chamber exploded into chaos. Counselors shouted protests in a dozen languages, translators struggling to keep up. Give humans control of the entire defense fleet? It was unprecedented, unthinkable, completely against every protocol we had. "Silence!" First Speaker Thal Nayar's voice cut through the pandemonium. "Ambassador Blake, explain your reasoning." Sophia stepped forward, her expression serious. "The Void Eaters operate on perfect logic, consuming everything that follows predictable patterns. We propose fighting them with controlled chaos. Our ships, our tactics, modified with human unpredictability." "You want to fight cosmic entropy with chaos?" Professor Yul Mar looked like he was about to faint. "Actually," Captain Sterling interjected, "we want to fight it with several things. Experimental weapons, untested theories, and something we call tactical nonsense." Dr. Blackwood brought up another display. "We've been developing technologies that, by your standards, are completely insane. Probability drives that navigate by deliberately calculating the wrong coordinates. Quantum torpedoes that exist in a state of maybe explosion until observed. And my personal favorite, entropy reversal bombs that work because we convinced the laws of physics they're actually healing crystals." That's not how physics works," Professor Yul Mar protested. "Exactly," Dr. Blackwood beamed. "That's why it might work against enemies that operate on strict physical laws." I studied the faces around the chamber. The other council members wore expressions ranging from horror to fascination. But beneath it all, I saw something else: hope. Desperate, crazy hope, but hope nonetheless. First speaker Thal Nayar's patterns had shifted to decision gold. Admiral Kazloth, your assessment. I stood, facing the council. Throughout history, we've tried to contain humanity's chaos, their refusal to follow established patterns. We've seen it as a weakness in our galactic society. I paused, looking at each council member in turn. But against an enemy that feeds on order and predictability, perhaps chaos is our greatest weapon. You support this insanity? Rix AR demanded. Counselor, with all due respect, insanity might be our only hope. Every logical defense has failed. Every predictable strategy has been consumed. We've spent cycles trying to make humanity follow our patterns. Maybe it's time we followed theirs. Ambassador Blake stepped forward again. We're not asking for blind faith. We're asking for a chance to save everyone, in our own weird way. And if nothing else. She smiled, that particular human smile that usually preceded something either brilliant or catastrophic. We promise to give the Void Eaters the worst indigestion they've ever had. Captain Sterling pulled up a tactical display. We've already begun modifying ships with our new systems. The USS Improbability is ready for its first test run. We've equipped it with what we're calling random number generators. You're going to fight cosmic horror with random numbers. Professor Yulmar looked ready to resign on the spot. No, Sterling grinned. We're going to fight cosmic horror with weighted random numbers. The weights are determined by a complex algorithm that factors in butterfly wing movements, cat behavior, and whether Mercury is in retrograde. That's astrology, not astronomy, someone pointed out. Exactly, Dr. Blackwood exclaimed. The Void Eaters understand astronomy. They've never encountered astrology. How can they predict something that doesn't make sense? I watched the council members' faces as the reality of our situation sank in. We had a choice: maintain our precious order and face certain destruction, or embrace humanity's chaos and have a chance at survival. The combined fleet hung in space like a constellation of artificial stars. 10,000 ships, the greatest armada ever assembled, all retrofitted with what Captain Sterling insisted on calling probability jammers. I stood on the bridge of the flagship Cosmic Dancer, watching as human engineers made their final modifications. Admiral Kazloth, Captain Sterling called out, "You might want to see this." I floated over to his station, still adjusting to the artificial gravity modifications the humans had insisted on. They'd altered it to fluctuate randomly within safe parameters, claiming it would help mask our presence from the Void Eaters. We've completed the final installations, he reported. Every ship is now equipped with what we call the Chaos Drive. And this works how? Exactly, I asked, dreading the answer. Well, you know how your ships normally calculate exact jump coordinates. Yes. We're doing the opposite. Each ship's navigation computer is now running a program that deliberately calculates the wrong coordinates, then adjusts based on quantum uncertainty principles and today's horoscope. Before I could point out the numerous violations of physical law this represented, our sensors lit up. The Void Eaters had arrived. They appeared as patches of absolute darkness against the starfield, areas where reality simply ceased to exist. Our conventional sensors showed nothing, but the human-designed anti-logic detectors lit up like festival lights. All ships, battle formations, I ordered, then caught myself. Belay that. Captain Sterling, you have tactical command. Sterling grinned. Thank you, Admiral. All ships, assume random positions. And remember, if you think your maneuver makes sense, you're doing it wrong. What followed was the most bizarre battle in galactic history. The human ships led the charge, moving in patterns that made my tactical training scream in protest. They spiraled, zigzagged, and occasionally appeared to dance. The USS Improbability was performing what Sterling called a space waltz. Target approaching Vector 227, reported our tactical officer. Perfect. Helmsman, take us to Vector 226.99999, Sterling ordered. Fire up the confusion cannons. The confusion cannons, another human innovation, fired beams of quantum particles in superposition states. According to Dr. Blackwood, they couldn't decide if they existed or not, and therefore confused the Void Eater's entropy-based sensory systems. Sir, the Void Eaters are adapting to our random patterns, called out Lieutenant Patricia Nash from her station. Then it's time for Phase 2, Sterling announced with alarming cheerfulness. Deploy the cat videos. I watched in bewilderment as our communication arrays began broadcasting what humans called cat videos into the void. Thousands of recordings of small furry Earth predators engaging in inexplicable behaviors. The Void Eaters operate on pure logic, Dr. Blackwood explained, noting my confusion. We're feeding them data they can't possibly rationalize. Have you ever tried to understand why a cat does anything? Remarkably, it seemed to work. The patches of void began to fluctuate, their perfect entropy disrupted by the sheer illogic of feline behavior. They're destabilizing, Lieutenant Nash reported. But they're starting to adapt. Release the memes, Sterling commanded. I had no idea what a meme was, but watching the effect on our enemy, I wasn't sure I wanted to know. The void entities began to contort in ways that defied geometry. Target the largest concentration, I ordered. All ships, prepare to fire entropy reversal bombs. The bombs were another human innovation, powered by what they called healing crystals, chunks of quartz that had been exposed to positive thinking and inspirational quotes. According to every law of physics, they shouldn't have worked, which was exactly why they did. Bombs away, Sterling announced. And remember, everyone think happy thoughts. Dr. Blackwood says it helps confuse the quantum uncertainty field. The bombs detonated in silent flashes of anti-darkness. Where they hit, the void began to fill with something that our sensors insisted was the color blue squared divided by happiness. It's working, Dr. Blackwood exclaimed. The Void Eaters can't maintain their entropy state when exposed to pure nonsense. Quick, deploy the rubber chickens. I didn't ask why we had rubber chickens in our arsenal. At this point, I was beyond questioning human methods. The battle raged on, becoming increasingly surreal. Human ships performed maneuvers based on dance moves. Our weapons systems operated on principles that made theoretical physicists cry. At one point, we defeated a Void Eater by convincing it that it was actually a cookie. They're retreating, Lieutenant Nash announced. The remaining entities are pulling back toward the Galactic Core. Oh no, you don't, Sterling muttered. Deploy our secret weapon. Captain, I began cautiously. What secret weapon? He grinned that particular human grin that meant someone was about to have a very bad day. Remember how we modified the ship's coffee makers? It turned out that humans had reconstructed our entire fleet's beverage dispensers into what they called quantum espresso machines. Each one now generated a field of pure caffeinated probability. Fire up the coffee makers to maximum, Sterling ordered. Time to give these cosmic horrors a taste of human morning juice. The combined effect of thousands of quantum espresso machines created a wave of what Dr. Blackwood called caffeinated reality. It swept through space, transforming the battlefield into something that hurt to look at. The remaining Void Eaters, unable to maintain their entropy in the face of concentrated coffee space, fled. Did we just save the galaxy with coffee? I asked incredulously. Coffee, cats, and chaos, Sterling confirmed. The 3 Cs of human problem solving. The victory celebration that followed was appropriately chaotic. Human ships performed victory roles that violated several laws of physics. Someone had programmed the USS Improbability's external lights to flash in patterns that made nearby space stations start playing ancient human music called disco. Dr. Blackwood was already analyzing the data from the battle, muttering something about writing a paper titled The Application of Nonsense in Quantum Physics, a coffee-based approach to fighting cosmic horror. And throughout it all, I couldn't help but think about how differently this would have ended if we'd stuck to our original plan of containing humanity's chaos. Sometimes, it seems, the galaxy needs a little nonsense to survive. The emergency council session following our victory was unlike any other in our history. For one thing, it started on time, a concept humans had somehow infected us with. For another, High Counselor Rix AR's scales had turned a shade of pink I'd never seen before. which our xenobiologists later classified as embarrassed acceptance. So first speaker Thal Nayar began, her bioluminescent pattern cycling through colors that suggested she was still processing recent events. Would anyone like to discuss the fact that we saved the galaxy using cat videos and coffee? Don't forget the rubber chickens, Ambassador Blake helpfully added. Those were crucial to the quantum displacement field. Professor Yul Mar, who had spent the entire battle in his laboratory running calculations, raised a trembling appendage. I have analyzed the data from our victory. According to every known law of physics, none of what we did should have worked. Exactly, Dr. Blackwood beamed. That's why it worked so well. The Void Eaters operated on pure logic and predictability. We defeated them by being completely illogical and unpredictable. But the professor sputtered. You can't just ignore the laws of physics. Oh, we didn't ignore them, Captain Sterling clarified. We just convinced them to take a coffee break. I watched as the council members tried to process this. Their expressions ranged from horrified fascination to reluctant admiration. Several were attempting to hide smiles, a gesture they'd picked up from human diplomatic staff. The question now, I said, drawing attention back to the matter at hand, is how this changes our approach to galactic governance. First speaker Thal Nayar nodded. Indeed. Our previous attempts to contain and control humanity's unique approach to problem-solving clearly require revision. What we need, Ambassador Blake suggested, is a new department. Something that combines your love of order with our talent for controlled chaos. And so, the Department of Innovative Solutions was born. Humans called it the Think Outside the Box box, which somehow made perfect sense, despite being grammatically questionable. The changes that followed were both subtle and profound. Our shipyards began producing vessels with intentionally unusual design features. Someone suggested adding fuzzy dice to the bridge of every capital ship, claiming it improved quantum probability fields. The scary part was, it actually worked. The Council's traditional 47-step application process was streamlined to just 46 steps, plus one step labeled Simply Perform Random Act of Innovation. BOB, the bureaucracy AI, was officially promoted to Deputy Assistant Undersecretary of Creative Paperwork. Even High Counselor Rix AR embraced the changes, though he insisted it was only because his scales looked good in the new officially unofficial Casual Friday diplomatic robes. As for me, well, I've learned to appreciate the human way of doing things. Yes, they're chaotic. Yes, they sometimes solve problems by throwing coffee and cat videos at them. And yes, they occasionally break fundamental laws of physics because nobody told them they couldn't. But they also showed us something important. Sometimes the best solution isn't the most logical one. Sometimes you need to think so far outside the box that you forget what a box is. Just last week, I found myself in my office, staring at a particularly challenging diplomatic crisis. Instead of consulting the traditional protocols, I asked myself, what would a human do? 20 minutes, and one rubber chicken later, the crisis was resolved, and two previously hostile species were sharing something humans call pizza. We still don't understand exactly how humans do what they do. Their scientific papers now include citations from both quantum physics journals and cat meme websites. Their military strategies are partly based on ancient Earth video games. And somehow, it all works. The galaxy is a stranger place now, but also a more interesting one. Our neat, orderly civilization has learned to embrace a little chaos, and we're better for it. Though I still haven't worked up the courage to try coffee. Some forms of human chaos are best observed from a safe distance. End report. Admiral Kazloth. Personal addendum: next week we're testing a new defense system based on something humans call dad jokes. The Void Eaters won't know what hit them. Neither will we, probably, but that's apparently part of the fun.